It's just scenes that I've cheated with.
Yeah, it's that good though.
I think it should be in the Google Drive, and you can download it and then fill with it if you want, Pete.
All right, okay.
I think it should be in the Google Drive. I can hear myself from somewhere.
There you are. All right, okay.
I don't think it's the YouTube that I can hear because it's muted.
Misha, is that you?
Fine. I'm on it. It's okay. Every time.
You've offended Louise now.
Sorry, Louise. Come back.
Turning my video off means that this thing gets more stable. If not, it's not going to last.
I thought you just had new internet.
I did. It's not holding.
Do you think it's the weather? Has it been raining a lot?
Well, we did have a lot of snow.
Well, there you go.
It's raining a lot here today, to be fair.
It's raining a lot here. It's sad. We've had 4 lots of snow this month. And I wanted more snow.
I've only had the one. I feel like I'm missing out. It is knee deep in places. Well, it was today. Knee deep in places around by me. Yeah.
Wow.
The joy of living at the bottom of a hill where the wind just pushes all the snow towards you.
Nice.
So,
I'm at the opposite. I'm at the top of a hill, so we just get what we're given.
I'm
at a different. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, Omar.
Hey.
Yeah, we had a load of people stuck. So we live. So you Nottingham people know where the park is. We live in the park, and there's 3 entrances. There's 2 high up on the top of the hill, and then there's 1 lower down on Castle Boulevard. Yeah. But the lower down one has bollards. So if you're not a resident, you can't get the bollards to move. But of course, then in the snow, it's basically a trap because all the delivery drivers are coming in and coming downhill into it, and they can't get out of those because it's uphill and they're sliding all over the place. But they can't get out of the downhill one because it's bollards. So there were like 50 delivery vans just all trapped in there, like Sainsbury's and DPD, all just like. We're trapped. You've trapped us.
Car thieves at the bottom rubbing their hands.
Yeah.
Go on, let's do it.
They're coming to us, boys.
The last couple of days has cemented my desire to get a car with 4-wheel drive.
Snow tires.
Yeah, man, it's awesome.
I think I'm at a different extreme here on the east coast of the U.S. I live in the Outer Banks, which is the coast of North Carolina. It's a beach town, well, a couple of beach towns, and it's a lot of rain outside, so there's a lot of flooding. So definitely need a 4x4.
Don't let the snow fool you, Omar. We get that if it's not snow.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah. Our 2 choices are swimming or skidding.
Yeah.
That is true.
The really cool app that I think it was Carol linked to in like the Tech Nottingham Slack. I need to go back and find what the actual URL is, but it runs in the browser and like you can change your view basically. So like people put their camera in front of their window and you can just like tap
I've seen
see
that.
like the views from different people's houses all around the world.
Window swap.
That's really cool. Huh?
It's window swap.
Thank you. Yes, window swap. I got quite obsessed with it, and yeah, for like half an hour I didn't look up. It was cool.
Because you can do it like I think you don't have to pick one, do you? You can just randomize it if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you don't get to pick the ones that people have got pets.
It's true.
There was one, and there were deer eating outside the window.
Wow.
And one where the snow was like really, really deep.
How is your dog liking the snow, Liam?
She's standard Sadie, really. She was fine running around the garden, and then then as she came to run to come back in, she realised it was icy, but too late. And towards the garden gate, she slid. So
I shouldn't laugh at that, should I?
Oh.
Please tell me you got that on video.
I unfortunately I didn't, but so I had my daughter this weekend, and she kept bringing snowballs in for the dog to eat. So
that's always fun.
Yeah, she's she doesn't like the rain. Like she doesn't like going for a walk in the rain and stuff like that. But she loves the snow. Because I've got because I live basically in the countryside. I've got quite a long garden, and she'll just sort of sprint from one end to the other in the snow, and then and then come back. But yeah, she's a big fan of snow. Every dog I've ever owned has been a big fan of snow, to be honest.
Why wouldn't you be? That's great. Unless you have to drive somewhere, in which case it's not that great, really.
Yep.
Cold and wet. I don't get
Yeah,
you.
but beautiful. And
It is, yeah, it is very pretty where I live, to be fair, and the snow does make it prettier.
I mean, admittedly, I like the snow now much more than I used to. When I don't leave my house anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a massive advantage.
Although I have had two delays to various deliveries because it's we can't get you because weather.
The rear-wheel drive car is not fun for this.
Oh yeah, you've got that BMW, haven't you? I think. Yeah. Good fun.
When it's not snowing.
Yeah.
Well, slippery in any way, shape, or form. In fact, you have to steer the opposite way you'd imagine to get out of a slide or something, haven't you? Really odd.
Yeah.
It's an automatic as well. I've been driving now for nearly 2 years. I just hadn't bothered before, for various reasons. So, and I decided my first car would be 1, sporty, and 2, automatic. So driving in the snow and having to use that manually in the snow was a new experience for me. So...
Yeah, I'm happy to have my 4-wheel drive truck.
The next car will have all-wheel drive.
That would be good. I'd like snow tires. They're called snow tires?
Would it make that much difference on your car, Misha?
Probably not. Thank you.
It's the law in Germany, I think, when it snows, you've got to have snow tyres on or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it steeper tread? I've never looked into them, but I've heard about them.
Spikes, I think, is it?
You can get ice tires that have spikes on, like metal spikes.
Cool, like cleats.
Finland.
But for you.
Yeah, it's like a
Softer
softer tread as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Interesting.
Okay, folks. Well, folks, we're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Welcome everybody who has been joining in over the last few minutes whilst we've been chatting. Feel free, obviously, to put your cameras on, and if you're comfortable with them off, that's okay too. Because obviously we do stream out to YouTube as well. So basically, because it's going from Zoom, anybody with their camera on will appear there. So we'll get started in about 5 minutes or so. Thanks, folks, for coming. Obviously, I can see we've got a few people from over in the States as well. So welcome, and thank you for taking the time out of what I imagine is the middle of your day to come along this evening. And is that John Allsbore I see as well?
It is. Hi.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hi. I thought this seemed like a set of topics that I'm interested in, so I thought I would listen in, just lurking.
That's fantastic.
That's okay.
You'll see your name come up every now and then on the slides.
We were suggesting when Tom and I were chatting earlier, we suggested that what we need to do is to get you to come back next month, John, and speak and go, here are all the reasons why Tom was wrong.
Hey, listen, my feeling is that any attention in the industry is good attention, right?
Sure. Yeah.
There's one thing worse than getting something wrong, and that's not even being aware that it exists. So
I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ignorance can be bliss, though, sometimes.
It's very true.
But with that in mind, Tom, you better be good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Tom is we've sat and chatted a little bit about a bunch of stuff before. So he was on the last episode of our podcast as well. So the Agile Engineering podcast, where we were talking about psychological safety, and then we've got another episode of that coming out with a second part with Tom in the next couple of weeks. where we dive into some real world examples and that kind of thing as well.
Listen.
So we've
Been
had
trying to get rid of him for weeks.
Persistent.
Right. So hopefully, we just check my stuff's working as well.
I'm going to take my hat off because I'm getting a bit warm.
Thank you for wearing it, though. I think it looks very fetching.
Thank you. Thank you.
But obviously, really the last sort of year of DevOps Knots has just been a documentation of my hair getting progressively longer.
Mine has too, but you just can't tell.
This time next year, I'll be there, Misha.
Okay.
Yeah, my face getting furrier, I think.
That much catching up to do. That much. I think you can do it. Right. I think maybe a minute or so, and then shall we crack on?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, right.
I think we've got a few red hatters on board, I think, haven't we?
A bit of a convention going on.
Yes, we do. Oh, hey, Kansu.
Hello. Hi.
Right, folks.
And Captain America as well, by the looks of things as well. Mark, I'm very impressed.
I'm really digging the Stormtrooper helmets behind you, and I see a Mandalorian as well.
Yeah, I've got quite a collection. If I move slightly to, no,
Ooh, wow.
It's the Batman picture that I like most of all.
That's awesome.
my office is a tip. other than just that side, which is lovely and pristine looking.
That's what my virtual background is for. Right, folks, are we ready to begin? I think we're probably in a good place to get going. So, let me share my screen. So welcome everybody to the first DevOps Knots of 2021. Obviously we had a really great year last year with everybody coming from doing the in-person events to then on to our remote events as well, and we had a great lineup of speakers. And 2021 is no different, and we've got a fantastic speaker this evening for you as well. If you're already from the sort of Nottingham area in the UK, you probably know him quite well, but we'll go into that in just a minute. First of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the event, who are Rebel Recruiters, who helpfully provide us with the Zoom, and prior to now, obviously our premises and food and stuff. Stickers, who provide us with our DevOps Not stickers. So if you're after any of our lovely branded stickers that feature our logo, just drop us a message and we can send those out to you. And obviously we have a giveaway this evening for a JetBrains product license as well. And they provide that for us too. If you like what you hear this evening and want to hear more of Tom, more of myself, Misha, Louise and Peter, who are here as well, the only person from the hosting team who aren't there, but want to know more about these sort of topics, have a listen to the Agile Engineering Podcast, which is available pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Tonight's giveaway obviously is this JetBrains product license, and all you need to do to win that is during the course of tonight's meetup is send a tweet with the hashtag DevOpsNots, and we'll pick a winner at random at the end of the evening. We are of course also always looking for speakers. If you're interested in coming along to talk at DevOps Knots, whether it's about DevOps, whether it's about things like resilience engineering, which we'll be talking about this evening, whether it's specifically about something in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and so on, please feel free to get in touch with us on our email, which is contact@devopsnots.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us at DevOpsNots on Twitter, or either myself or Misha, you'll be able to find on there as well. And speaking of Misha, I'm going to hand over to her to just do a quick section on recruitment.
everyone's favorite topic. Yes, hi. I'm a recruiter at Rebel Recruiters, if you couldn't tell. I recruit mainly in East Mids across all kind of tech roles. Most poignantly, I am recruiting for the illustrious Liam Gulliver. We're recruiting across the board at MMT, and yeah, so I'm heading that up. So if you want a new role, be it AWS, Azure focus, contract perm, or you fancy something else like a PM or a BA role, don't know why you would, but you know, or a dev role, any kind, just come and have a chat with me. I'll try and give you some advice and point you in the right direction.
Cool, thank you very much, Misha. And obviously, some of the roles that Misha mentioned, I'm actually recruiting for well, me at the moment, ultimately. So they're sort of DevOps engineers and site reliability engineers and cloud architects, that kind of stuff. So anybody who's watching, if you are interested in that kind of thing, feel free to message myself or Misha if you've got any questions. So on to this evening. We have got the brilliant Tom Geraghty joining us to talk about resilience engineering, psychological safety and socio-technical systems. But we're going to do things a little different tonight. So you might be, if you've been before, you'll know that usually we have a couple of speakers on. But tonight we're going to have Tom sort of also kind of workshop this as we go along. So we want to make it more of a, I guess, Tom, the best way to describe it is like an open discussion.
Yeah, there'll be elements of open discussion, a few points through it, yeah.
So if you have questions as we go along, or something that you want to point out or anything like that, just drop them into the chat, and at these points, then throughout the discussion, we can raise that, and that applies to both here in Zoom and over on YouTube as well. So, without further ado, please give a big DevOps Knots welcome to Tom Geraghty.
Well, thanks everyone. Right. Now for the tech stuff, I'm going to try and share my screen.
I think I may need to mute some people. Unless you want to mute yourselves. Just in case anybody, like, you know, decides to dry their hair in the background.
Right. Are we good in terms of screen seeingness? Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. So hi everyone. I'm Tom Geraghty. I'm EMEA Transformation Lead at Red Hat Open Innovation Labs. I've been working with technology teams and organizations for nearly 20 years now. My key areas of interest around DevOps, ways of working, lean, and psychological safety. I'm also studying for a master's degree in global public health and humanitarianism. Outside of work, I'm an avid mountain biker, and I try to spend most of my time in the mountains when not restricted by a pandemic. You can find me online at Tom_Geraghty and at my website at tomgeraghty.co.uk. So Red Hat, you may have heard of Red Hat. Red Hat is the world's largest pure play open source business. And if I may say so myself, Open Innovation Labs is the coolest part of Red Hat, where we work with organizations to transform and improve teams and organizations using open processes, culture, and technologies to help drive business performance and resilience. And as part of Open Innovation Labs and the transformation team, I work with these fine gentlemen, some of whom you may have heard of from such books as Web Operations, a DevOps Handbook, and the Phoenix Project. Tonight, we're going to be talking about resilience engineering and DevOps and psychological safety. The intention for this meetup is as much active involvement as you want. So yeah, as Liam said, post questions in the chat. But if you prefer, just kick back with a beer or tea or whatever and just listen and observe. We might not get through the entirety of the talk because it's a massive subject. What we will come away with are some ideas for you to take away and consider applying in your organization, and hopefully we'll have an even better idea of where to take the discussion about resilience engineering in the future. Personally, I sincerely believe that resilience engineering, or at least something very like it, represents the next phase for transformation and the evolution of organizations. Now, to begin with, I'll ask you to think about a submarine. A submarine that contains technology, it contains fuel, it contains armaments, radar, supplies, control systems, escape pods, medical equipment, spare parts, and around 150 people in this submarine. It has to operate at sea for months at a time, carrying out exercises and operations, but it also has to deal with surprises, challenges, unexpected events, or even attacks. Now, this submarine, this is the Santa Fe. This is a submarine that was commanded by David Marquet, I'm not sure, when he wrote a book, before he wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around. And in the book, he describes how before he captained this machine, he acted like any other submarine captain. When he was on this boat, he unknowingly gave an impossible order. He asked people to put the throttle ahead 2/3, and there was no 2/3 on it. But his crew tried to follow it anyway, because when he asked why the order wasn't challenged, the answer was, because you told me to. He then realized that he was leading in a culture of followers. He was leading followers, and they were all in danger unless they fundamentally changed the way they did things. So he took matters into his own hands and changed the way that the US Navy traditionally lead. And before long, the crew assumed responsibility for everything they did. They became leaders. They all became leaders. They became engaged and contributed their full intellectual capacity every day. And the Santa Fe, this submarine, became the best in the fleet from the worst in the fleet. Now, through this talk, I'd like you to keep thinking about that submarine. I'll also introduce you to this guy, Loren Hochstein. He's a senior software engineer at Netflix, and he's very active in the field of resilience engineering. Now, we talk a lot in DevOps and tech about agility and change and responsiveness. We put a lot of effort into Agile, Scrum, product and delivery and DevOps practices to help teams become more agile and more responsive to change. But what about the wider organization? Do you feel like organizations, especially once they exceed Dunbar's number of 150, are really agile? Are they responsive to change? How do they react when they're faced with a big challenge, like a huge market disruptor dropping in, a brand new competitor, or a global pandemic? Do they even see those things coming? Do they quickly detect change and adapt to surprise? Do they effectively learn from those challenges and embed that learning? So this session, this talk is going to be about that scale of things, the complexities of big systems and change. Now, Scott Sagan, another character in the resilience engineering world, in a book called The Limits of Safety, describes how organizations, particularly the US military, became too relaxed about the precautions that they had against mistakes and accidents in respect to the enormous power they'd created a few decades ago in respect to nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. And this was in the 70s and 80s, I believe. And they, of course, denied it. And because there's a shroud of secrecy veiling military operations, it was hard to disprove them. But Scott Sagan investigated through freedom of information requests and interviews with retired personnel, and found that particularly during the Cold War, things like routine satellite tracking, civilian rocket tests, which is like rocketry enthusiasts like my friend Andrew Bullock firing toy rockets high into the atmosphere, things like the Aurora Borealis and faulty equipment, or simply equipment that was difficult or confusing to use. The risk of an accidental nuclear superpower confrontation, i.e. global thermonuclear war, the risk of that was over 50% during that period. So during that period, the chances of us accidentally destroying the entire planet through global thermonuclear war is over 50%. And so I want you to remember this phrase as well. Resilience engineering has a lot in common with safety culture, which is where, if you've seen my previous talks, we'll talk about things like Chernobyl. And you'll often hear resilience engineering proponents use the maxim, there is no root cause. By which I mean, so systems are generally very well protected against simple failure. Think about the Challenger disaster, Chernobyl and Nagasaki Beirut explosion, or the 2008 financial crisis. Now, for the Beirut explosion, the primary blame for the explosion in Beirut Port Authority for leaving, so they left 2,750 tons of highly explosive ammonium nitrate at Hangar 12 for nearly 7 years in unsafe conditions. Many top officials, including Ministers of Finance, Public Works and Justice, and Lebanon's President and Prime Minister, knew of the presence of this nearly 3,000 tons of explosive in the years and months before the explosion. The explosion was actually the result of a fire ignited by sparks from welding works on a metal door. Now, if you think about this disaster, there is no single root cause. If someone had raised a concern and had been listened to, if the condition for storage had been proper, if the welding hadn't been required to be done, it wouldn't have happened. There are multiple myriad causes for everything. There are multiple component causes for every incident, every failure, indeed every success. And in fact, the more that systems are protected against simple failure, the more susceptible they tend to be to catastrophic systemic failure. All those little measures to protect against atomized failures, such as the ones we might take against individual microservices, network congestion or failures, storage layers or whatever, gradually adds complexity and actually increases the brittleness and potential for failure cascades. So this is where we're starting to talk about resilience engineering itself. Resilience engineering is a cross-disciplinary field. In fact, this is adapted from one of John Allsport's slides. It's a cross-disciplinary field made up of researchers, practitioners, and contributors in all these fields, from safety science, organizational psychology, control systems, and ecology, and stuff like that. While we're looking at this, we need to address the word engineering, because it's not really engineering in the sense that you would normally use it. It's not software engineering or civil engineering, although it may span into those fields. It's engineering in the wider sense, but we'll come back to that soon as well. Now, Eric Holnagel, he's another key guy in the field, and he coined the terms safety 1 and safety 2. And these are really useful and interesting things to remember, because safety 1 refers to approaches that try to avoid failure in systems, and they investigate when failure occurs to try and find out what went wrong and then fix it. Here's the tendency to look for that root cause, and looking for that root cause could mean missing the broader component causes. Now, safety 2 is about the converse. Safety 2 tends to look at successes and create systems and cultures where failure occurs less often, through things going right more often, not going wrong less often. So we've just talked about the word engineering. We also need to talk about the word systems. So this is Dave Snowden's Cynefin framework. This is a systems taxonomy. And some of you may be familiar with it. And I want you to take your mind back and keep thinking about that submarine. Now, if you start at the bottom right, simple systems are fairly easy to deal with. There are no unknowns in these systems. They're fixed and repeatable in nature. The same process achieves the same result every time. And so we humans can use things like standard operating procedures and instruction manuals to work with them. So this could be like a simple Lego model. You don't need any prior experience. You don't need expertise in Lego. The instructions will get you there and enable you to work in that system. Complicated systems are large, usually too large for us humans to hold in our heads in their entirety, but they are finite and have fixed rules. They possess known unknowns, by which we mean that you can find the answer if you know where to look. A modern motor car or a game of chess are very complicated, but they possess fixed rules that do not change. So with expertise and good practice, such as that employed by surgeons or engineers or chess players, we can work with complicated systems. Now, complex systems, if you look to the upper left, they possess unknown unknowns, and this includes realms like battlefields, ecosystems, organizations, and teams, or humans themselves. In the practice in complex systems is probe, sense, and respond. You can kind of think about that as experimentation. Complex systems resist reductionist attempts at determining cause and effect because the rules aren't fixed. The effects of changes can themselves change over time. So the attempt of measuring or sensing in a complex system can affect the system itself. So when working with complex systems, feedback loops that facilitate continuous learning about the system are crucial. This is why it's probe and respond and run experiments. Now, chaotic systems on the bottom left, they're impossible to predict. They include things like emergency departments or crisis situations. There are no real rules to speak of, certainly none that you know of, even ones that change. In these cases, acting first is necessary. You act and see if it worked. Communication is rapid and maybe top-down or broadcast because there's no time or indeed any use for debate. Now that you'll see there's a little gap there in the middle as well. That's where confusion lies. This is where you're trying to work out what system you're actually in. On the right of this chart is the realm of explicit knowledge. We're going to come back to some of these concepts later on. On the right is the realm of explicit knowledge, like standard operating procedures and instruction manuals. On the left is the realm of tacit knowledge, of expertise and experience. Now, resilience engineering largely, though not exclusively, applies to complex systems. And this is largely in relation to complex systems that contain people, i.e. socio-technical systems. And to just draw you to the word socio-technical theory has at its core the idea that the design and performance of any organizational system can only be understood and improved if both the social and technical aspects are brought together and treated as interdependent parts of a complex system. Now, so we've covered quite a lot of interesting and in-depth topics. So it may be time to have a quick look at Q&As and see if we've got any Q&As to deal with. So, Liam, do we have any questions?
There's none from YouTube or in the chat at the moment, but does anybody have anything that they want to ask now? If you have, just stick the Zoom hand, I guess, effectively up. I don't think there's anyone. Okay, so let's carry on for now.
Let's carry on. Excellent. Right. So I had these ready to go in case, but we don't. So John, here's your first quote. So resilience. Resilience is the ability of a system, the ones we're part of, like businesses, communities, societies, to adapt to unforeseen, unanticipated, unexpected, and unlikely events and challenges. Now, of course, they might not be challenges; they might be opportunities. But without this sustained adaptive capacity, a system can't effectively take advantage of them or deal with them. And since at the current time, the technical elements of a system, the technological elements of a system cannot truly observe, anticipate, decide, and learn, it is people that are the adaptable elements of a system. And this is another term I'd like you to remember. This is sustained adaptive capacity. It's an excellent and concise description of resilience. The second tweet here is part of a conversation John and I were having about psychological safety and resilience engineering, and we'll come back to psychological safety in a little while. So finally, now we're really talking about the word resilience. And when we talk about designing, particularly in the DevOps world, when we talk about designing highly available systems, we usually cover techniques such as redundancy, retries, failbacks, and failovers. We think about what might go wrong. We think about things like server failures, network congestion, or network failures, and we design the system to gracefully handle these situations, including things like increasing or decreasing demand. Now, David Woods is a professor at the Ohio State University, where he's lead for the Initiative on Complexity in Natural, Social, and Engineered Systems, and he's the co-director for Ohio State University's Cognitive Systems Engineering Laboratory. Woods uses the term robustness to refer to systems that are designed to handle known failure modes. And by that we mean things like where servers might fail, all those things we actually think, well, that probably will happen at some point. Now, resilience, on the other hand, describes how well the system can handle things, troubles that were not foreseeable by the designer. You can think of robustness as being able to deal with the known unknowns, like those in complicated systems, and resilience as being able to deal with unknown unknowns, as in complex systems. Now, think back to the submarine. Think about that submarine and think about what components of that submarine comprise robustness and what components might confer resilience. And I want to, I'd like you to remember that they are two very different things. And this is yet another slide inspired by John Allspaw, who used a car for this, but I ride mountain bikes. So this is about mountain bikes. So the suspension on my bike there on the left is analogous to robustness. We know it's going to be bumpy. I don't know where the bumps are going to be, but I know it's going to be bumpy, so I need suspension to deal with it. I carry a spare inner tube for redundancy. We know I might get a puncture. It's a known unknown, so I carry a spare. And if we're going to talk about scale, because I might not have the ability to scale up and meet demand, I can have lots of bikes, and I can get more bikes and get more riders out on the trail. Now, what's the adaptable element in this world, in this system? Is it the bike? Is it the inner tube? Or is it the human? Because it's the human that is adaptable in this system here. Now, we're going to quickly look at what this might look like in a software system. So this is just an example of an auto-scaling group that's to deal with scale, there is an elastic load balancer that will only pass traffic to a server that is available. So these are dealing with known unknowns. This is robustness in technological systems. Now, as Eric Holnagel, who I introduced you to earlier, has repeatedly said since resilience engineering began, resilience is about what a system can do, including its capacity to anticipate, to synchronize, to be ready to respond, and be proactive for learning. Now, what Jabe has done here, again, you recognize Jabe from earlier on in the talk. What Jabe's done here is he's sort of reframed some of those things as anticipate, detect, and respond. Now, they're the activities, they're the things that a complex system is doing. Anticipating the incidents or events or occurrences, detecting them, and responding to them. Within that capacity requires a learning organization in the middle. Now, at the bottom of that, you can see the efficiency. In order to do stuff, in order to act, you need to be, to some degree, efficient. You don't need to necessarily be very efficient or less efficient, but you need some efficiency. Now, there's a tension between the ability to anticipate, detect, and respond and being efficient. There's a tension between resiliency and efficiency, because efficiency comes through optimal adaptation to an existing environment, while resilience requires the capacity to adapt to disruptive changes in the environment. Optimizing for efficiency reduces a system's ability to respond to change. You can make a car that is super efficient in a straight line on a motorway, but that optimization soon hinders the ability of the car to maneuver quickly, go off-road, drive in snow, carry large roads, or survive a crash. And the same applies to submarines. Presumably, I'm actually not an expert on submarines, but there's a tension between how efficient that entire system can be and how responsive and resilient it can be. There's actually a really good little write-up here on chiefexecutive.net, of all places, about the tension between efficiency versus resiliency. And there was a fantastic article by, I'm going to pronounce his name wrongly, but Tarcisio Abro-Saurin, I think, of the Industrial Engineering Post-Graduation Program at the Federal University of Rio Grande. And this is on the Resilience Engineering Association website, and this is about the requirement to build in Slack into a system in order to be resilient. Slack is also known as a buffer, but Slack adds complexities. adds significant complexities. Slack may only be introduced in hindsight to an incident or problem. Slack is also vulnerable to the efficiency pressures and lean efforts. As much of a fan as I am of lean, it does attack it bites into Slack, into a system. Lean may view Slack as waste or underutilization. So you need Slack in the system in order to be able to be resilient, in order to have resilience and do resilience. Back to Jabe again. A resilient organization, a learning organization, is one where everyone in it is constantly learning and improving in order to adapt to challenges and complexity. Now, this is a paper co-authored by Amy Edmondson of psychological safety fame. This paper was written in 2008, shortly before Google's Project Aristotle, and this paper was used as part of Google's project that ended up finding out that psychological safety was the single most important factor in high-performing teams. Now, in this paper, the authors describe how, in order for an organization to identify challenges and opportunities, learn from experiments and mistakes, indeed have the ability to carry out experiments and mistakes and innovate, and crucially, adapt to the unpredictable, teams within that organization require high levels of psychological safety. So with the right foundations in place, a high degree of psychological safety, an organization can become a learning organization, which I consider analogous to, or at least correlated with, a resilient organization. So maybe we'll have a little bit in the QA now, but is resilience engineering DevOps? Now let's have in fact, I am going to stop sharing my screen if I can do so.
So I had a quick question, Tom.
Yeah.
How, from a resilience engineering standpoint, I guess from a technical systems side of things, I guess it's easier to wrap your head around. But from a people level, how do you ensure that teams are resilient and individuals?
So, great question. We'll come to that. That's psychological safety, amongst some other things. That's the second half of the talk. So
cool. In which case, let's move on. Ben in the chat has asked, do you think that trade-off between efficiency and robustness is similar or parallels to the idea in Taleb's work on anti-fragility?
Ooh, so this is the second time this has come up today, and you know what? It's definitely related, but I don't know if I'm an authority enough to be able to say whether it's the same relationship. But that is a really good question, and that's something I need to research.
I have not read Taleb's work, and maybe some other people won't know. Is there like a TLDR of Taleb's work?
Well, actually, who asked that question? Could we get?
I think it was Ben Moss.
Ben, would you mind giving a TLDR of anti-fragility?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Can people see me, hear me? I guess.
Yes.
Cool. So the it's a tough book to read. It's very mathematical, but the basics, then the tagline is things that gain from disorder. So systems that get better as they get thrown these challenges.
Huh.
As opposed to the idea that you build something that's amazing and robust up front, like a kind of a castle that will stand for 100 years until it comes up against a challenge like a nuclear bomb.
Got it. So are we talking about concepts there like chaos engineering, chaos monkey things?
Yeah, sure.
So to my mind, and I'd be really interested to hear John's take on this, but to my mind, that still speaks to robustness. But is John around? Would John care to weigh in on that one?
Yeah.
On which part? I would say that the thing that I would say is that the understanding of resilience and what makes for resilience includes all of the things. It's entirely inclusive of what Tal did describe, and yeah, the notion that resilience, the reason why he invented a new term largely is because he believed that the existing terms weren't sufficient. My personal view is that it wasn't entirely necessary, because resilience is about adaptations to unforeseen. The normative idea of a system getting better is one that is dependent on perspective. Better for whom? Better for people outside this particular system. In what ways? And so it's not. I generally just stick to talking about resilience, because there's a much more. There's a much longer sort of empirical base, right? There's that resilience engineering has sit on. That's.
Thanks, John.
So my slight problem with this is that I wonder where something goes from being a known unknown to an unknown unknown to a known unknown, right? So if I try and use a ham-fisted analogy, if we were all in a building and we had a fire drill every Tuesday, and we had to get up and go and get out. Now we might, as a group or within the same room, we follow the drill that we've got, and then let's say, for example, some wag turns around and goes, "Oh look, what if that route was closed, and so we're going to pretend there's a fire at that exit point." And that team has then got to go a different way. I know this isn't a particularly good analogy on this kind of, this is more robustness than resilience, but there's a point at which these known unknowns become known, right? So is it then discounted as and pointed to robustness rather than resilience? So I guess it's kind of, because we can all get fanciful and come up with pandemics or nuclear wars or aliens landing from space or whatever, right? But where does that line cross? I think that's probably why it's difficult to explain. Yeah. Or that's why I'm struggling with it a bit in that sense.
Yeah, no, I like that, and you've actually led on to two points that are going to come in the second half of the talk, which is great. And the other point I think is that there is in the Knevin model, those lines are drawn like lines, but actually they're not lines; they're gradients. So we need to remember there's shades of grey around all this stuff. So if everyone's cool, we'll crack on with the second part. Awesome. So we're going to look at some ways to do resilience engineering, or at least facilitate better resilience. Now, we talked about Slack. This is conceptually a nice way to visualize building in Slack. So reduce and optimize utilization. This is the only chart that is in the Phoenix project, and it's because it's so damn useful. This is wait time versus utilization. So, and we'll just visit this quickly. So, if you imagine a system or person is 50% busy, they're busy 50% of the time, they're utilized 50% of the time. Your chance of interrupting them and finding them free is 50%. And if you divide, so this is how you get to wait time. If you divide the time busy by the time free, you get to 1. You divide 50 by 50 and you get 1. So let's call that a wait time of 1. If you then move over to 80%, so someone or something is utilized 80% of the time, you divide 80 by 20 and you get 4. So your wait time is increased from 1 to 4. That's not too much of a big deal. Now you go up to 90% utilization. Your wait time increases to 9 minutes because you divide 90, you divide the amount of time utilized by the amount of time free, and 90 by 10, you get 9 minutes. Now, suddenly at that point, it starts to go exponential because if something is utilized 99% of the time, you divide 99 by 1, you get 99 minutes. So this is the point. The point is that at the upper end of the utilization spectrum, your wait time becomes exponentially, increases exponentially. So look at your systems and find the optimum amount of slack in the system. Now that might be 60%, 70%, 80%. It's unlikely, I believe, to be anywhere over 80%. So this is a really useful chat to remember. Secondly, manage your cognitive load. This is a it's a fantastic concept. First introduced to me by Matt Skelton and Manuel Pais in team topologies. Now, if you look at these 3 different types of working memory: intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. Intrinsic is like your own personal skill. You just know how to do this stuff. Extraneous is all that stuff you've got to find out from elsewhere. Like maybe if you're working on a car in the garage and you don't know where all your tools are. Extraneous is, well, I need to find all my tools. It's that stuff you've got to go and spend cognitive load on. What you're trying to maximize is germane, because germane is problem solving. Germane's the cognition that is really useful, and that's where we provide value. So it's also where you enable people to deal with surprises and solve problems. So by maximizing the amount of germane cognition available to people, you're maximizing the resilience of the system that they're in. And you can do this through various ways, through automation, taking load off of people, taking toil off people. You can make systems and tools easy to use. You enable fast and easy communication. You make documentation easy to read, easy to find, and you right-size systems for the team. This is where Matt and Manuel really focus about Conway's law and right-sizing systems. They talk about software that fits in your head, which is a lovely phrase. So yeah, manage cognitive load. Manage your technical debt too. Technical debt slows you down and it makes problems harder to solve by making systems more brittle. We've all worked with systems that have high levels of technical debt, and they're very, very difficult to work in. They're much slower to work in, and they're much more brittle and susceptible to failure. Now, we also need to increase observability, because resilience is about dealing with challenges, with incidents, with things that happen. So we need to see them coming. We also need to know how to deal with them when they arrive. So increasing observability inside your systems by monitoring tools, by tools that monitor CPU usage, network utilization, scaling, all those metrics, all those technology metrics, they're great. But it's also important to remember that they are looking internally. And technologically, we're great at looking internally into our systems, or at least most of us are. We're not that great at looking outside. We're not that good at looking outside the organization and looking at what might be coming in to hit us. So working on increasing observability. This one is really important as well. Practicing root cause analysis. And back to that statement at the start, recognizing there is no root cause. All incidents and successes have component causes, and they have things called. So I'm studying global health, and I came across this concept recently called Rothman's causal pies, and this is an epidemiological concept, but I think it's fantastic for root cause analysis or postmortems by considering all the potential causes of an incident, of a thing. And when you've got all those potential causes together, they create a sufficient cause. Now, an incident may have more than one type of sufficient cause. And what you're trying to look for are the common factors between them, so that if you only you may only need to solve for B and C, and this incident is going to happen, if that makes sense. But the point is identifying or recognizing that incidents have no single root cause. They are systemic, component, complex areas. This is a huge area. This is possibly one of the most important elements of resilience engineering. So it's also particularly useful to look at incidents that were actually not that severe, because by looking at incidents that were incidents but weren't severe, you can identify and learn from the elements that mitigated the impact of that incident. You're examining both failures and successes at the same time, and studying incidents that have a really big impact can get derailed or impacted by political or other pressures, like management pressures, which may inhibit deep and honest introspection or investigation. But it is also important to look at successes, because you don't learn how to have a great marriage by studying divorce. Now, to Chris's point, yes, it's critical to carry out fire drills. This does two things. This identifies flaws in process, flaws in practice and procedure and process, and where those processes and procedures can be improved and made more resilient. But what it also does is it enables humans to be more resilient by maximizing, as we just saw, their germane cognitive ability, because they're not, if they've practiced this fire drill over and over again, they're not having to worry about, oh, what's a fire door? How do I use a fire door? How do I activate the alarm? They've done those things a million times already. So they're able to focus their cognition on the things that really matter, the problem-solving stuff. It's also really important to implement appropriate team topologies. This is from Matt and Manuel's team topologies book. The team types are streamlined team, enabling team, complicated subsystem team, and platform team. Now, most of us will be familiar with streamlined teams, but there are these other team types and interaction modes that are worth considering. This is a number of talks, so I'm not going to go too deep into all of these. But by better implementing the appropriate team topology, you're managing the cognitive load on team members, you're facilitating better communication between teams, and you're facilitating improved resilience across the organization. Now, we mentioned psychological safety a number of times, but yeah, increasing psychological safety and maintaining it is crucial to maintain and create resilience within an organization. Because if people, so psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Now, it means people being able to run safe to learn experiments. It means delivering news, or it means feeling safe delivering news that the recipient might not want to hear. It means expressing diverse opinions, asking for help, and admitting mistakes. Now, you can imagine that in order for an organization, for a team to be resilient, it needs people within that team to be able to put up their hand and say, I see a threat coming, I see a risk coming, or I've made a mistake, or there's a problem. And if they don't feel safe doing that, you're definitely not going to have resilience in the system. Now, Sidney Dekker, who is another person who's key in the resilience engineering field, more in safety culture, he found the same thing with airlines. He found that airlines that report more incidents actually have a lower passenger mortality risk. There's an inverse correlation between the number of incidents reported, the honesty, the willingness to take on that conversation about what might go wrong and what things actually go wrong. So if you're flying back from San Francisco or Washington or wherever, find the airline that's recorded the most incidents, and you're more likely to get to the other end alive. And Amy Edmondson found the same thing with the clinical teams, and that's how she discovered, for want of a better word, psychological safety. Now, this is my working definition of psychological safety, that in a group context, psychological safety manifests as the belief that other members value your contributions and concerns and will not harm you actively or passively for expressing them. It creates space for group members to take calculated risks, admit vulnerability, and acknowledge mistakes without fear of negative consequences. And I've rather arrogantly put my own name against that quote. So if you're building psychological safety, I think this is really it's an important thing to remember with psychological safety. And some of you will be familiar with this from other talks and podcasts and things. The 4 stages. So the first stage of psychological safety is being a member of the team. We all want to feel included, just being in the team, just being present, being and belonging. This is just essentially being comfortable being present in the team. Very basic stage of psychological safety. Second stage is learner safety. This means being able to ask questions, give and receive feedback, experiment and make mistakes. Third stage is contributor safety. And that means being able to participate as a member, contribute your own personal ideas and suggestions, and use your own unique talents and abilities to make a difference. Now, this requires a higher degree of psychological safety because when you're contributing your own ideas, you're contributing part of yourself. And if someone else was to criticize your ideas, to some degree, they're criticizing you. So it requires a high degree of psychological safety. The fourth stage is challenger safety. This is the highest level of psychological safety. That means being able to challenge the way the organization, the team does things, to challenge the ideas of other people in the team, to challenge the ideas of the people in charge of the team. And what's interesting also, what's important to note is that team members are happy at this stage. This is also correlated with increased happiness. Very few high-performing teams are unhappy. High-performing teams are not happy because they're high-performing. They're high-performing because they're happy. Happiness precedes success. So we'll just quickly talk about this because this is a great way of measuring psychological safety. So this is a survey that you can do with your team and ask your team to score agreement with these 10 statements. Now, these are based upon Amy Edmondson's 7 statements from 1999 that were used in Google's Project Aristotle, but through my own research and stuff, I've expanded upon them and added some more in. If you identify with your team, with your organization, the statements where you store the lowest agreement, then you've identified the areas where you can start to focus your efforts and increase psychological safety. And all these things are really about things like, can you take a risk? Can you ask for help? Does your team find the systemic root cause rather than blame people? So how do we build resilience? This is a summary of the last 40 or so slides. So we need to build in slack. We need to build in the necessary adaptive capacity, because if you're too finely tuned, you're too brittle. We need to manage cognitive load so that people can focus on the real problems of value, such as responding to unanticipated events. This also means using automation, using DevOps practices. You need to pay down technical debt. We all know what happens in systems with high technical debt. Everything slows down. It's very difficult to work with. Your cognitive load increases as well. We increase observability and monitoring, which applies to systems, internal systems, and the world, the external world. People and systems cannot respond to a threat if they don't see it coming. We embed the practices and expertise in root cause analysis, and whether you call it a post-mortem, retrospective, or root cause analysis, building the habits and expertise to routinely examine the component causes of failure will increase your ability to prevent incidents in the future and deal with incidents as they come up. Run fire drills and disaster exercises. Make it easier for humans to deal with emergencies and unexpected events in those chaotic systems. Increase the cognitive load available for problem solving in emergencies. Structure the organization using team topologies in a way that facilitates adaptation and change. Consider the appropriate team topologies to facilitate the best adaptability and resilience to change. Finally, create psychological safety. which means that people can ask for help. They can raise issues. They can highlight potential risks, and they can apply their judgment without fear of repercussion. So this is a quote by Ryan Heinrich, another guy who's really hot in resilience engineering. He's a principal software engineer at Procore Technologies. Before you can engineer resilience, you must engineer the conditions in which it is possible to engineer resilience. And this, by the way, is exactly what David Marquet did on Santa Fe, the submarine, by empowering, emancipating, creating space for learning, raising concerns and autonomous decision-making. He created a high-performance, more resilient system. So to summarize, we've only really scratched the surface here, and they're incredible experts in the field and vast amounts of resources to find out more. It's about resilience engineering is about complex socio-technical systems. There is no root cause. It's a multidisciplinary field. It's about the ability to anticipate, detect, respond, and adapt. It's about an organization or a system having the sustained adaptive capacity to deal with changes and incidents. It's robustness, which is not resilience. Resilience acts against efficiency, and likewise. A resilient organization is a learning organization, and there are, at least in this presentation, 8 ways to increase organizational resilience. Personally, this is just my personal take, but personally I feel that resilience engineering is the direction that DevOps is going in. That's not to say DevOps is resilience engineering, but DevOps is localized optimization in technology, and resilience engineering is expanding this concept to the wider organization, wider systems. And I feel that's the direction we're going to be going in the next few years. So I think it's Q&A time and possibly beer time.
That's the best time, Tom, really.
It's the best time.
So we've got a question from the chat from Louise. Says, I can make my team happy by giving them free beer and pizza and telling them not to worry about doing any work, but they will not be productive. If, however, I give them the space, the tools, the psychological safety, and the support to do a good job, they'll be able to be productive, and that will make them happy. Could you explain why you put that the other way around?
Yes, that's great. Actually, there is a really handy quadrant exercise that you can do with this, and I completely agree. Psychological safety is not enough on its own to drive performance, but it is a necessary component. In fact, if we talk about Rothman's causal pies, every single causal pie of high-performing teams will possess psychological safety, and as a result, it will possess happiness. It's not necessarily to say that happiness is a cause of performance, but it is a corollary outcome.
I'd also say that that's not necessarily the type of happiness that you're talking about. So, giving somebody stuff for free, that can be, that can be a temporary fix to happiness. Arguably, assuming that they're not teetotal and they're not, lactose intolerant or have a gluten allergy or something like that. But I think the happiness that I'm expecting you're talking about, Tom, is more sort of about driving purpose and passion within the team, and then feeling connected to a mission, and that sort of end of happiness, rather than sort of a more material happiness. Yes. in that sense.
Yes, absolutely right.
Yes, freebies, we do end up with different complaints. Surprisingly sometimes.
Again, it's kind of, I've got sort of a follow-up question again. Not against it, kind of. It was something that was mentioned recently. I think I was reading it from one of the many reports, and I apologise, I can't put my finger on which one now. But recently it was said, it might not even be that recently, because I've just had a lot to consume recently, that teams are happiest when they're shipping something. How do you think that? Well, how true do you think that is? And do you think that we need to be able to engineer for resilience first before we can kind of get to that sort of state?
That's a good point about teams being happiest when they're shipping something, but I would say that that end result of shipping, like deploying frequently, is another component of all the other things we're doing in DevOps. Deploying frequently also means being able to. So this is probably answering your question better. Deploying frequently, deploying small changes frequently, is a prerequisite for a low mean time to recovery, for example, which will make teams happier because you're not putting out fires all the time. So I think what we're coming back to is a lot of this stuff is feedback loops. Increasing psychological safety increases performance. Increasing DevOps capabilities increases performance. Increasing performance increases psychological safety and happiness and resilience.
Can I yes and that, Tom? So I have a real world example. So we had a team I was working on, and our delivery pipeline was not in place yet. So it would take months for the teams to see, hey, I worked very hard. I spent all weekend trying to get this release out, right? And it would be months before they would get any feedback from customers, and it would be either, and usually with the longer time frames, it was just negative feedback. Well, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't working. Now, once the pipeline was in place, we did more frequent releases. We were able to establish quicker feedback loops, and we're able to respond to change. We're able to, if an issue rose, we're able to pivot and correct it. And then the positive response from the customers, like I can see the team, like you can see that, they're raising up and what, we're doing great. We want to do more. And it's encouraging versus, hey guys, here's some pizza and some beer. Have a nice day. So it's that positive reinforcement, having that environment, like you said. And again, quicker feedback loops enables the team. It's a different type of happiness there.
In other work, I kind of hear, I think I've seen it in some of Jabe's work, people talking about a sense of agency, so that the team can kind of see the difference that they're making. They can work closely with customers, and there's a small feedback loop or short feedback loop between the actions that the team are doing and the impact that it's having. And I think that relates to the kind of happiness that you're talking about, Tom.
Yeah. It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, it's that kind of disconnection, if you like, from the vision and purpose. If it takes so long, you've just got you've no touch points. It's not tactile enough, if you like.
You'd be surprised how much a little, hey, great job goes. It goes a long way.
Very true. Very true.
Cool. Have we got any more questions, folks, or comments, or things you'd like to feed back to Tom on?
I really want to double down on, creating psychological safety with the team. That I am a strong proponent of that. I push that 110% for all the teams I work with. But, I forgot who said this quote, but you want to create an environment where it is okay to fail, but it is not okay not to learn. So the challenge I see is you can accomplish that at the team level, but at the organization, division, department level, that's where the challenge is. And that's where you have to. So I think my question is where have you had opportunity to work with at the org level of creating that environment of psychological safety?
Well, we're doing it at Red Hat right now, actually. In fact, I had a few conversations today about beginning to embed some of these measurement and improvement feedback loops inside Red Hat. I've been involved in programs in the past in organizations where we've regularly measured and improve psychological safety. I think so there's two interesting points there. That the main thing to me is the biggest win is about measuring it, making it explicit, making it surfacing the whole concept of psychological safety in an organization. Once you've defined it as a thing, people understand what it is and understand that it exists. You're already onto a winner. And the other thing I've just completely forgotten, and I'll come back to it in a minute.
I think on that, Omar, I think there's also well, I like to, maybe it's because this is what I'd like to think, I'd like to see, but I'm certainly hearing this narrative used more and more in the boardroom, is this realization that cost efficiency and that ultimate drive for cost efficiency is now really hard to drive out anything for the bottom line. And so there's a sort of a all too slow, I think, but there's a shift towards sort of value creation. And that's what you sort of see the cloud native organizations, they're focused more on value creation than they are on efficiency. And therefore they're able to take new markets, and I think, judging from Tom's talk, they're more resilient in the way that they operate. But this idea that we can kind of continually go down this cost efficiency curve, and it's all about chop, 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 or cutting everything here, you're just making yourself more and more brittle. And I think maybe we'll see this accelerate again even more due to COVID. The whole kind of something can genuinely switch everything off, or switch a lot of stuff off, or really change the environment significantly. And if you've gone down that cost efficiency curve to the point where you've got no slack in the system, you cut down to the bone, then that's that sort of problematic. So I think that shift to value creation rather than cost efficiency will force execs and leadership to think about how we operate and how we deliver IT in a different way, and that moving towards more experimental, more resilience, more ability to sort of probe, sense, and respond. Some experiments fail, others we scale, all those other kind of things, right, that come through. I like to think that we'll see more leadership willing to take that risk rather than relying on on a cost-cutting exercise, and probably managing rather than leading.
Yeah. In fact, a nice example, I can't remember which car manufacturer it is, but one of the big car manufacturers, possibly Volkswagen, recently got into some strife because they'd optimized so specifically to build internal combustion cars, and they could innovate and they could bring out new models really quickly, but when the world switched, or the world has switched or is switching to electric cars, they're finding it incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive to turn the ship around and pivot to this new world of electric vehicles, because they've driven efficiencies and optimization so far down that road they couldn't change direction, or they found it hard to change direction.
Sorry, couldn't find mute for a moment. So any other questions? I mean, that's been really, really great, Tom. Some really useful insights as always whenever you come and hear yourself talk. I don't think we've got any questions from YouTube, but if there are any more here, just raise your Zoom hand, and if not, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get Tom on Twitter, which is just at Tom_Geraghty as well.
Yeah. In fact, what I will say, if anyone is interested in finding out more, there is some stuff on my website. I'm as I said, I'm no expert. There's some great resources on the Resilience Engineering Association, which in fact I will post. So I'll post that in the chat here. Liam, where would be a good place to share? If I give you a bunch of links and resources, and maybe this slide deck as well, where would be a good place for people to get that from?
I can put it on the I can put it on the DevOps Knots GitHub if you want, or wherever's easiest for you.
That's a good shout. Let's do that, and then we'll tweet that out from the DevOps Knots.
Yeah, sounds good. There has been another question for you as well, Tom, from Mordy. He's asked, this is a new subject for him. Is there anywhere that you could recommend as a starting point or primer?
Well, that's in fact
the link that you just sent me.
Yeah, so in fact, so I sent it to you. I sent it to everyone. There we are, and it's literally called "Where Do I Start?" So it's a Resilient Engineering Association. Sorry, it's a www.resilience-engineering-association.org/resources/where do I start.
Perfect. So, folks, as Tom and I were just discussing, all the Tom slides and a bunch of resources will be available on the DevOps Knots GitHub, which will be just github.com/DevOps Knots. We'll create a resilience engineering repo and put the resources there. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming this evening. It's been lovely to see you all after a long Christmas break, because obviously our last one of the year is always in November. It's good to see everybody doing well, and really great to see a lot of new faces this evening too. We will be back on, let me just make sure I'm getting the right date here, because I nearly said the wrong one. The 23rd of February, yeah. And we'll have speakers announced for that really soon. The last thing we need to do, though, Misha, is the prize draw.
Yeah, who wants a JetBrains? Well, we shall find out. I will draw somebody at random. I'll do a bit of a drum roll. I'll attempt a drum roll. It's not going to go great. And the winner is Neil Clayton. Neil Clayton.
Neil, if you keep an eye out in your DMs on Twitter, we'll get that key across to you shortly. And that'll be for basically any JetBrains product for a year. And even when that has expired, if you choose not to renew it, you'll get whatever product you renewed it for, the previous version of it, perpetually as well.
Very much.
So
This was awesome. Folks. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Liam.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mika.
That was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
Cheers, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Then the YouTube's off.
Oh, yeah, I do need to stop the YouTube. That's a good point.
It's all good. Thank you